Well, if you're anything like me, I'm sure those post-Halloween blues hit you pretty hard. But fear not, because today I want to give you some of my favorite movies to watch in November. Hey, what's up everybody? Nick here, and today I wanted to give you guys a few of my favorite horror movies to watch in November, for Thanksgiving, whatever you want to call it, just this time of year. See, it should go without saying that November is a really weird month when it comes to horror movies. October is loaded. You can watch pretty much any horror movie in October and it just fits. Christmas is actually getting pretty loaded too. And then November, Thanksgiving, it's just always this weird barren wasteland of what do I watch over the next 4 weeks before we turn the page to Christmas? Well, I'm going to tell you. So the first movie I have on my list is Robert Eggers' The Witch. Now, let me tell you guys something. This movie is very much an art house elevated horror film. So if that's not your thing, you're probably not going to like this movie. Having said that though, I think this movie is way better than a movie like The Babadook. See, The Babadook is a movie that I find to just be pretentious, whereas this movie, yes, it is kind of that elevated horror style, but there's actually real stakes here. It's not just a bunch of metaphors and symbolism. Anya Taylor-Joy is great in this movie. I love the fact that it's a period piece. Robert Eggers totally nailed the atmosphere, the vibe, the time period. Look, this movie is not one of those movies that doesn't have a payoff, that is just going to string you along with a bunch of highbrow content. No, The Witch has that, but it has payoff and it makes sense at the end of the day. And just watching the movie, the vibe that you get, the aesthetic, you're like, you know what? Yeah, this is a November watch. Next up is going to be Radio Silence's Ready or Not. Now, this is one of those movies that I sought out after Scream 5 had been announced. It had already been out for a year or so. I hadn't watched it yet, but in preparation for Scream 5, I wanted to see what these guys had. Look, this movie is great. It is so fun. But if you're looking for like a scary slasher movie or, anything in between there, it's not really that. This movie is over the top. I put it in the vein of a movie like Freaky or Happy Death Day, something like that, to where you're watching it, you're just having a ball. The reason this movie makes this list is because it really does feel like it is taking place around that time of year. There's a lot of cold, outdoor, wooded shots and sequences. It just seems like the perfect watch this time of year. So, Ready or Not is another one you should watch this November. Next up is going to be one a lot of you guys probably watch in October, but not me. It is November for me, and that is The Blair Witch Project. Look, this movie just fits November. Like I said, you could watch this in October because it is a horror movie, but it just feels like the movie itself is this desolate, lonely, creepy film, and it just feels perfect for November. That month where nothing is really going on, insert The Blair Witch Project. And maybe I'm a mark for just the woods and cold weather and not really having any iconography from the holidays for me to say, oh, okay, this could probably fit in November. But that's what I'm going to do. Look, everybody knows The Blair Witch Project is a classic. It is a movie that does not need an endorsement from me. Again, you can watch it any time of year, but if you're not a fan of found footage, I understand why you've probably never liked this movie. But I think that this movie is the granddaddy of the found footage genre, and it is peak found footage, and you should watch it in November. Next up is going to be specifically The Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. Nothing else in the Evil Dead franchise. I mean, if you want to watch them in this, month, that's fine. I totally get it. It doesn't really have to be an occasion to watch those movies. But I think the first two Evil Dead films really fit perfectly in the month of November. Something about being set in this isolated, desolate cabin in the middle of the woods. It's clearly cold outside. Again, like I said with Blair Witch Project, there's no iconography to pinpoint what time of year it is, aside from the fact that it's cold. I just think it works really, really well. Now, I guess you could make the argument for Evil Dead 2013, and I'd hear that one, but there's something about the old school feel and look of the first two films that just feel like they really fit in a time like this. Now, if I had to pick, I'd say The Evil Dead is probably the best one to watch this time of year, because it genuinely feels like it was shot in November. And maybe it was. Maybe I have no idea. I honestly don't know what month it was shot in, but the first two movies you cannot go wrong in the month of November with. Before I get into my next one, I just want to say a few words about Todd. Tony Todd was a trailblazer. He was a genre icon. He had done so many incredible roles that he will be remembered forever for. Platoon, Night of the Living Dead, Candyman, Final Destination. The guy was a horror icon incarnate. He left way too soon. We don't know exactly why. I would have to imagine he was sick. If it was cancer, again, cancer sucks. Tony Todd, thank you so much for everything you brought to us, and that brings me to Candyman. This is one I feel like is perfect to watch in November or like January. Doesn't work with Christmas, doesn't work with Halloween, although you can watch it in October, like I said. But it's one of those movies that clearly is shot and takes place in the winter or the late fall. And there's no kind of iconography anywhere to say, oh, it's around this time of year. No, it's just freezing balls. Like that's the aesthetic that you get from Candyman. And it works perfectly this time of year. I've always loved watching this movie in November. It's actually been a movie that's been like a pick-me-up for me ever since I was a kid after Halloween, getting those post-Halloween blues. It just fits perfectly this time of year. Again, a common theme you're going to see with a lot of these movies I'm talking about is the aesthetic, the atmosphere, the vibe. Do they fit in this time of year? Does it seem like a good pairing? Candyman is one of those, so I think you should watch it in November. And again, rest in peace, King. Now, these last two are the two I think you need to watch in November. Period. No exceptions. First is Ready or Not. I've talked about this movie before. I've talked about it in live streams on the podcast, how I feel like this movie is the perfect November watch. And I believe I've actually had people in the comments before saying, well, the movie was supposed to be centered around Thanksgiving and then they changed it. Like, it makes sense because it just feels and looks like that type of gathering. Also, everything you get, all the outdoor shots, it just looks like late fall. You guys know the difference, especially if you're in the Midwest or in that region. You know what October looks like as opposed to what the final week of November looks like. They're totally different. October, you still got a bunch of leaves on the trees. Yes, they're dying in their different colors, but like they're there. The foliage is there. Late November is when everything's on the ground. Everything's dead. The trees are barren. It just has that look to it. And Your Next has that look to it. This is the perfect Thanksgiving watch, in my opinion. Not even just November. It just feels like a family getting together for Thanksgiving and a bunch of people just start dying. Look, I've said it once. I've said it a million times. If you're not watching Your Next in November, what are you doing? And then the number one movie to watch in November/Thanksgiving is Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. This is a movie that vaulted up the list for me. And I guess it wasn't that hard because there's not a lot of Thanksgiving-themed horror films. I know, guys, Thanksgiving, I know. But, like, let's be real here. Look, this movie somehow manages to, like, ooze Thanksgiving. Like, it just does. There are decorations everywhere. You've got turkeys. You've got a parade. You've got everything you need to really make it feel like, holy shit, this is a Thanksgiving movie. And they are so few and far between. But furthermore, this movie is just awesome. Like, it is super fun. It is definitely a throwback old school slasher with some great performances. Patrick Dempsey steals the freaking show in this movie. Like, period, bar none. He just does. This movie, I'm so glad exists, and I cannot wait to have this in regular rotation every November for me for the rest of my life. And hopefully it is creating a new franchise with Thanksgiving 2 being announced, because that would be so cool. Because again, we are in a month that is so underrepresented, and Thanksgiving goes to show you, you can really lean into that time of year and that holiday, and it can work perfectly. So those are just a few of the movies I think you guys need to watch in November/Thanksgiving. But I want to hear down below in the comment section, what ones did I not mention that you watch every November and why? I want to hear it down below. What did I mention that you disagree with, that you say, I would never watch this in November? You have no idea what you're talking about. Again, I want to hear it down below. So sound off in the comment section. Please make sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I'm pulling out.